Howdy, folks. Happy Tuesday. All three of us were talking music, and we could probably do that for an hour or 2 hours. But we're gonna talk a little music in the pre-show, and then talk a lot of hockey. Go ahead, Russ.
Well, we are going to have a Rockology coming up, so that's definite. Mike and I are talking about that. But in the interim, let's talk about the final show. This was the real final show for Genesis. So, because again, we all have talked about the other final tour, and this was it. The interesting thing is, I think you get to a point in your mind where you love a band so much that maybe you're willing to supersede what you're hearing and kind of default back to what you want to hear and what you're hearing on stage, and you kind of mix it, and it's okay. Because even with my favorite band, yes, like I won't go see the other band. It's no slight to those guys. I just don't think it is. And I'll see anything John Anderson's in because he's really kept his voice up and he's not that far off. With this, Phil Collins is far off, like to the point where when he's doing Carpet Crawlers, I told Mike, because they happen to have the video camera in close, he's literally just singing half the song. He is letting the background singers do all the harmonies, which he used to harmonize with, and he does none of now. And, if that's the tone of the show, like if that's what he can do, that makes me not interested. Do I love the band? Yes. Do I have amazing memories of Genesis? Yes. The best show I saw was at Forest Hills outdoor show. They played Supper's Ready for the first time in 30 years. It was amazing. That whole show was amazing. They had the Phoenix Horns there. It was just incredible. It was more than I could ask for, and I'd seen them probably 3 or 4 other times, but I wouldn't have wanted to see this show. So they'll live on in my house with a lot of live music, because I love live music, and some of the studio stuff, but I love live music. So I usually get bootleg concerts, all kinds of stuff.
Joe, Genesis is my favorite band.
Mm-hmm.
I saw them first when I was 11 years old. I've seen them, I think, 7 or 8 times in Buffalo or in Toronto. And, in the early 80s, they came around almost every year or every other year. They were here for, I saw them down and then there were 3 tour, and then Duke, and then Abacab, and then and the Mama album. I mean, I saw them every time they came to town. I stayed outside for 7 hours in 20-degree temperatures, freezing my ass off to get tickets at Central Ticket Office. And I ended up getting like Reds at the odd. That
was in June, right? That was a June show, wasn't it, in Buffalo?
No, it was Russ. The show was in April, but the tickets went on sale in January.
I know.
And I froze my balls off. It was like down on Delaware Avenue. But this is the point. I saw them a ton of times. I saw them in 2009 when that was the reunion tour, when it was supposed to be Gabriel and Hackett getting together, and that never happened. And then I was a little bit disappointed. And then I was more disappointed when I saw the show and the songs were different because Phil couldn't hit the notes. It was not even a tough decision for me this time around when it was the final tour. I'm not into this, it's nostalgia. No, I want to see a good show, and I wasn't going to see a good show from them. And even though I love them as a band, it was easy to say no.
I mean, the tempo, if you watch the video, Joe, the tempo on
Dancing at the Moonlit Night, and then
Dancing at the Moonlit, everything was ground to like a halt. I told Mike, you could have had like Bela Lugosi, narrate it.
It was like Gollum from Lord of the Rings singing Carpet Crawlers. It was like he's just he's in a chair and he looks for it's terrible, Joe.
Any thoughts from you, Joe?
See, that's a bummer because when it comes to Genesis, I didn't really get into them until college. I had my prog bands that I already liked, and then started listening to Genesis. And a buddy of mine who was an exchange student from England asked me why, and I go, "Listen, just leave me alone, okay? Just it's fine." And he's like, "All right, well, that's
I gotta go call an RBI game. Leave me alone."
Yeah, leave me alone. But like when that happens, I was tempted to get tickets for the Genesis show. But I was just like, I don't know. I wasn't feeling it. Now, when I saw the Who live a few years ago, that was really impressive. Now, granted, only Pete Townsend and Roger Daltrey are still with us.
I saw it, and it was still really good. It was better than this. The music of Genesis sounds okay, but
Yeah.
The scene.
I was lucky to see the 25th anniversary of Quadrophenia. That was the last tour that Entwistle did. So I'm fortunate that I saw that one. But this is my point. It's like, okay, I saw Rush's last concert, and the songs were still great. The songs were the way that we've heard them on the radio. And Eddie couldn't sing as well as he did back in the 80s, but he could still sing. But he could still sing. I saw the live Tragically Hip, the last show, and Gord Downie with a brain tumor was singing better than Phil Collins did. Sting and the Police in 2009 when they did their reunion tour, they were fantastic. It's like, if you can perform, charge whatever you want, but they were charging ridiculous amounts, and they were not even half the band that they used to be. And that's the thing that pissed me off.
I mean, Chester Thompson is not even on this tour, and technically he's a member of the band. It's like he toured with them for what, 20 years, Mike?
No, 77. So he toured with them for like 30 years.
30 years, and he was not on this tour. Now, I get you want Phil's son there, but actually, Genesis fans got used to having dual drums on the tour, so I don't see why you wouldn't have Chester unless
there was
Phil's son can't.
There was a falling out there, Russ. I know for sure there was.
No, I know, but I do kind of wonder too. Like, I'm sure Phil's son can't keep up with Chester the way Phil could keep up with Chester, and maybe that's an issue too.
Last thing before we start the show. So Joe, the big news came out about the Bills stadium, which we've heard for a while that it wasn't really in question. The only thing that irks me is, okay, they're going to spend $1.4 billion, $850 million of which is taxpayer money from the state, and they're going to build it across the street in friggin' Orchard Park, and it's an open air stadium in the snow belt. I mean, at least they could have put a dome on it. At least they could have put it downtown. But no, they're going to spend pretty good money. And the best thing is that
not my money, thankfully.
But the best thing is they locked them in for 30 years with the lease. But I'm sorry, it's like it's I don't know. What do you think?
It's a lot of money for property in Orchard Park. It's a lot of money, like that. I mean, they did this all to cut costs. That's why they're not doing it downtown. That's why they're not putting a dome on it. That's why they're not doing all this other stuff. And I don't know. I'm disappointed it's not downtown. That's my biggest thing. Because that makes way more sense. I know logistically, and there's all sorts of things you got to sort through. But listen, Carl Palladino and the Pagulas were busy buying up all the land around the arena, trying to one up each other on how to do it and try to scam each other out of stuff. But I don't know, man. Figure it out. You're spending a ton of money. You're taking a ton of tax money to do it. They're covering all the the overspends on everything. Figure it out, man. Do something a little bit better. That's the whole thing.
There's an area in downtown Buffalo near the casino, near the arena, that would be better off if they dropped a small nuclear device.
Yeah, I've driven past. I know.
And that's where the stadium would have been. Basically,
that would be good. I mean, that would be
great. Now the only thing is, well, they wouldn't be. I'm sorry, they would have been able to have parties outside and tailgate down there.
Listen, you know what? Honestly, if you're trading tailgating for location, which is it going to be? Which would you do?
I'd take the location, but I think if you put a stadium down there right on the lake, right near the river, you'd have to have it a dome, and that would have probably increase the price by
definitely would have increased the price.
$500 to $600 million.
And New Yorkers are probably fed up with just paying any taxpayer money for any stadium, no matter who the team is.
Yeah.
That's where I feel like I'm smiling here in New Jersey, because I still have my New York team. I'm from New York. The Jets are here. That place isn't going anywhere. And it's like the same thing that you just said, Joe. It's got like a 30-year lease, and they're maintaining it. So it's not going to be like what happened with Shea Stadium or anything. And there's not going to be another one. That's the one bad thing about New York is you have all of these sports teams, and if they're all going to be publicly funded, you end up paying for them all. And I just think in this era, that's bad. But
yeah, I mean, I think of all the state money they threw for Yankee Stadium to get that done. And I mean, Steinbrenner was crying about, having to pay an $80 million bond every year. That's why they can't invest in the team. I was like,
yeah,
go cry somewhere else, please. That's that. I'm not listening to that, Hal. That's stupid. But I think if it comes down to it, I mean, if that turns into an excuse down the road for if the Bills owners, whether it's Pagulas or somebody else in the future, I mean, the Bills fans have been down that road already with Ralph, so I mean, wouldn't be anything new.
I think ultimately it's good that the Bills are secure and there's no chance of them moving. But do I feel like Pagula should be chipping in his fair share here? Yeah, I do. Because
he's chipping in $350 million.
That's it. That's nothing for him.
$200 million from the NFL, $350 from the Pagulas, and $850 from the state.
I mean. Yeah. Anyway. It should be double that Pagula is chipping in.
I agree.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's Jesse Pagula's dowry, I guess. Okay. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Tuesday, March 29th, 2022.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. And we are pleased to be joined once again by Joe Yerdon, who hosts the Maintenance Day podcast with Lance Lasowski, something I listen to all the time. Hi, Joe.
Thanks, Mike. That's nice. That's nice to have listeners. That's great. Thank you.
I'm on. Okay, let's start with some sad news. The passing of Eugene Melnick, who, I touched base with somebody I know who covers the Senators, and we know that he had a liver transplant years ago, but it wasn't widely known that he had cancer recently, and I'm not sure they haven't released anything in terms of how he died, but he was only 62 years old, so this was really unexpected. And I mean, we're sad for his passing, but I think we have to wonder what this portends, Joe, for that franchise, because they have significant debt. I know he has a couple daughters and a sister. So I'm assuming it will pass to them, but whether that team will be sold and whether they stay in Ottawa, because he was somebody who wanted to keep the team in Ottawa, but there's Quebec City with a brand new building hanging over things, and I think that's a concern.
I think that would definitely be a concern for sure. I know, Melnick had spent the last few years trying to figure out how to get an arena, back downtown in Ottawa to get out of Canada. Because they went from playing at the Civic Center, which was a shoebox, to playing out in Canada because they were able to put an arena there. But he wanted nowhere. Yeah, there's nothing around it. But they wanted very badly to get back downtown, which it makes a ton of sense where everybody is. But I do wonder if whoever is going to take control wants to deal with that. They want to deal with owning a team.
I don't think they're gonna, Joe. I'm with you.
Eugene was all in on it. Now, he had very funny ways of showing it and very funny ways of doing it. But he was definitely all in on it. But, there were certainly cost concerns there. I mean, they carved up the roster a few years back, and, then getting rid of Mark Stone and all that. And then, started giving money. Yeah. Carlson, then they gave all the money to Thomas Chabot and Brady Tkachuk now and them, which hey, it's a nice young core. That's a great start, but I do wonder if there's any want from whether it's his sister or his daughters or whoever, if they want to deal with that, because let's face it, I have to think they're not making a ton of money in Ottawa, and especially with the team being as bad as they are. It's we've seen the attendance, we get it, but
to that point, Russ, we do know that because it was reported when there was talk about a Canadian team playing in the U.S. when everything was shut down in Canada, that team was the Ottawa Senators. It was Melnick who was saying, because he needed the money of the everyday gate come in, which maybe is an indication of how bad financially he was. But I just wonder. I agree with what you're saying. I don't know whether I'm sure they're in grief right now, and this is the last thing that they're thinking about. But the NHL has to think about the stability of the franchise, and to me, Quebec City it's always made the most sense to move that team to Quebec City, and because they're. But what do you think?
A couple of things. First one is I did kind of expect this. For him to pass at some point. I remember hearing that he was getting chemo and such.
Yeah, I did years back.
Maybe it was only said to me at a game or something, and that's where I knew and maybe thought it was public knowledge. So, that part sucks. He definitely wanted to keep Ottawa there. He definitely did not want to spend the requisite amount of money. That was never going to happen. Like that. basically he kept punting that and punting that and punting that. And so that never happened. He definitely tried to get the downtown thing to happen. I know people who live there. I know somebody who owns a newspaper there. And so I would be kept abreast of that. And that was not Melnick's fault. That was really Canada's fault, Ottawa's fault, the capital. That was on them. There was so much red tape that it made it very hard to get a place downtown there. I don't know why. I think
they wanted it down near the I think it's the Rideau Canal. I've never been to Ottawa, but I know
Rideau Canal. Yes.
Yeah, they wanted it downtown down there, and they can never. There was essentially a real estate fight, and that was the reason why it didn't get done. And this is the thing, Joe. That's the seat of the Canadian federal government. Mm-hmm. I don't think the NHL is going to be doing the Canadian government, if they get pushback from Trudeau. I don't think they're in the mindset of doing them any favors based on what they did and what happened to the NHL because of COVID, shutting down buildings, and they're not prepared to do them any favors. So if they get more money by moving the franchise to Quebec City, I think they're going to do it. Now, I don't know if that's the case, but I think that's highly possible.
Yeah, it's a very fascinating situation, just because I think when Quebec City, after they built the new arena up there, everybody's like, it's a matter of time. Either they're going to get an expansion team or somebody's going to relocate there. And the way that the NHL has been so committed to the American teams and keeping them there, even even some of the teams where you're just kind of like, I don't know how they're still there. Right. They've held strong to make sure to keep them there. And we started saying, you start looking around, you're like, okay, well, who in Canada would go? And everybody's eyes turn to Ottawa and go, well, that guy looks like, he's, Melnick's always been like, very adamant about keeping it in Ottawa. But at some point you got to think like he would have been like, all right, I'm tired of these. I'm tired of these fights. This is stupid. Yeah. But, Canada, I think, is of the point they don't want to lose a team. Again, like they absolutely don't want to lose a team, and Quebec City's been chomping at the bit to get back in it. I just wonder if some of the issues that led to the Nordiques leaving back in the day are any different. It's back then it was the tax, the tax rates, and it was also the currency. The currency difference between the U.S. and Canada was very stark. So that's the money was almost
the only difference.
Terrible.
The only difference, Joe, is. Ottawa does have pretty good corporate support. They didn't have it back with Quebec. That was one of their big sticking things.
And the ownership is much more stable. It's a multi-billion-dollar.
Well, I think in Quebec City's case,
on paper it's stable. I kind of with Joe. I think it got less stable as the years went on here and the pandemic drove on. And
it's not Jim Balsley. Let's just say that.
Yeah, but maybe he'll come back and try and purchase it. Here's what I think, though. I think. Next year they're playing in Ottawa, like that's for sure. Mm-hmm. Now, after that, I think the NHL and the family will try and sell to someone because I think they're going to sell. Usually, 99% of the time, the kids in the family don't want the teams. They usually want the money. So I think they'll sell. I think the NHL will try and keep them there. They'll see what kind of buyers they get there. But if they happen to get a buyer that really does want to move it to Quebec, which they will, somebody will come forward and say, I want to move it to Quebec, and they'll put that guy in the back and say, hold on, just wait a little while. And he'll probably have to wait months and months. In the end, it would not shock me if they went to Quebec.
Okay.
I don't know.
You can't put it in Hamilton, Nickel City. It's Hamilton's it's not big enough for an NHL franchise, period.
No. And, you mentioned the corporate thing as far as, an issue being the case, for Quebec back in the day. The guy whose name's always mentioned with bringing the team to Quebec City is Pierre Pelado, who owns Sun Media, which that's a pretty big outlet. I mean, obviously, media's and Sun Media has been a big part of like a lot of places taking hits across the country up there. But
editorially, I can see why. Based on some of the items.
No, I mean, just like combining some of the papers, Ottawa was one of the cities where that ended up happening. But
they have some lively headlines and stories, Joe. I'll say it like that.
It's like a New York Post paper across the entire country, essentially. But
it used to be owned. I think it used to be owned by Murdoch, didn't it? I think it was. I think I think they were associated with Murdoch in some way.
But
Dave in the it's okay. Dave in the chat is saying that there are people lined up to keep, and that's very.
I hope that's the case. I don't want to see the Senators fans losing their building. I've been in there for a draft, 2 or 3 different other occasions, all-star games and such. And
the problem is the building. The building location is asinine. It's like building the Panthers arena in Sunrise. It's just dumb. Or Arizona and Glendale. It ruins these teams because they can't draw fans to these buildings. So I mean, if you have good teams, I'm sure people would make. But and Florida has an excellent team, but.
Wait,
we'll see.
Just said something funny. He goes, "Big dairy money. Is there big dairy money now? Is there some sort of yogurt tycoon out there? What are we talking about?"
Okay, so the owner of YoPlay is going to buy the Ottawa Senators. All right, the GM meetings are going on in Palm Beach, and I wish I was there, because it's 20 degrees in Buffalo. But some news that came out that will affect everybody. The salary cap for next season will in fact go up $1 million. There was some doubt back in November and December when a lot of games were postponed because of COVID and the attendance limitations in Canada. But Joe, they will go up to 82.5, and for teams that are up against the cap, like I know for Toronto's sake, it's that's an extra $1 million, and they get out of like Phil Kessel's salary retention. So that's a couple $1 million. That could be the difference between re-signing somebody and not being able to re-sign somebody.
Yeah, it's a big difference. You'll have to forgive me. I'm trying to mess with tech side like having tech side issues here. I was only half listening to you, Mike. I'm very sorry.
So don't worry, I get that all the time on this. Okay.
I was trying to make sure my microphone was like not.
But 82.5 from 81.5, it's not significant. Russ does this. I get that, but for teams that are up,
you know what it does, Mike? It keeps Keith Yandel keeping his streak alive for some team that wants to give him the $750 to do it.
Go back to Arizona. You watch. They need roster fillers, but I mean, Joe, for teams like Philadelphia or Toronto, that $1 million could be the difference.
$1 million makes a big difference. That's the whole thing. Where these teams that are at the the apex of the salary limits, an extra $1 million is another player that they could bring up from the AHL that they don't have to worry about, dancing around, shuffling guys to LTIR and everything that goes with that. An extra $1 million means a lot to them. Now, teams in the middle and at the bottom, it doesn't, extra $1 million, just, probably another $1 million they got to spend to hit the floor at that rate. But, which, I mean, some teams' cases that might be a problem, but that's, it seems insignificant, but an extra $1 million, especially when things have been frozen for as long as they are, it means a lot. I mean, these aren't the big jumps that we've seen in the past where, it was an extra 2, 3, 4 million in some cases that, that's, honestly, you don't have to worry about that.
Here's what I would ask the panel. Is it better to go up $1 million this year or say, hey, everybody, including the players, let's wait another year. We may be able to get this thing to go up like 2 or 3. Because to me, $1 million is really not that big of a deal. But if you could get it to like 2 or 3 by next year, I think I would wait on that.
Renaud Lavoie reported that the projection is that the cap is going to go up significantly after the 24-25 season. So that's what, three more seasons.
Oh my God,
I know. It's going to go up $1 million a year each year until then. Now, of course, me being focused on Toronto, that's not good news in one sense. Say the cap goes up to $90 million. Well, that most of that money, or a big chunk of that money, might go to Austin Matthews with his contract being re-signed. The only problem is his contract is up after the 23-24 season. So more than likely, Joe, they're going to have to trade somebody off their roster to be able to re-sign Matthews. And I think that's probably likely if they lose in the first round this year. But I mean, teams with players that their contract expires before that jump are really going to be having to do a lot of cap calisthenics to be able to do it.
Yeah. I think, I like to think of that in the opposite way. I think of, especially in a Buffalo way, when, it was time for Sam Reinhart to get re-signed or extended or whatnot, there was some question about, with everything being frozen or for COVID reasons and money being, whatever, and having it be, everything being kind of stuck where it was. I mean, he only signed a 1-year extension with Buffalo, and then it was traded out after the year. Situations like that, you don't, if it's jumping by 3, 4, 5 million, then those guys, if your ELC is ending in that season and you're an elite player,
sure,
who would it be? The guys who were drafted this year would probably be that year. I think that was when their ELCs are. So, like, I don't know if you're Bedard, certainly, yeah. Owen Power might reap the benefits for sure.
I'll be happy.
Well, I mean, we'll see. We'll see if the money's there for Buffalo, but
he might take a bridge now and wait for that.
His ELC will be 3 years, and if he burns the first,
they didn't burn.
It's always 3.
He's still in college, and he's still.
No, I know, but he'll be out. He'll be out,
right? And he'll burn the first year this year,
right?
So his contract will be up after 23-24.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So actually, it will benefit him.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if he doesn't get the 9 games, though. Cheaper. Well, hang on. If he doesn't get the 9 games, doesn't his contract slide, or burning it immediately after signing it?
No, for the college players, just playing 1 or 2 games does.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that happened with I'm on leave, obviously leave focus, like guys like Matt Fratt, who came out of college. I know. I'm just saying. That's the guy.
I just love the name.
Casey Bailey, or all these NCAA guys.
Bailey, that was another good one.
Yeah, they played a game and that burned the first year. Now, other things that came out of the GM's meetings, a lot of talk about LTIR, and that there are some general managers that are open to exploring a salary cap involving LTIR for the playoffs. But Joe, this is the problem, and I've heard talk about this on both sides. This is part of the CBA, and they can talk all they want, but if the players are not in agreement with this, this is not going to change. So the LTIR situation, it's a workaround of the rules. It's not going to change for this CBA. So I don't know why they're wasting their time, but I think they're all pissed off that, Nikita Kucherov was dancing a jig after he won the Stanley Cup, and the fact that he was, oh, hey, I stayed out a month longer, and okay, they rubbed it in their face, but it's not that it's a workaround. That's what teams can do, and they can continue to do it. I don't think it's going to change.
You forget how spiteful the NHL is when they get shown up, right? Like, that, like, they hate stuff like that, and they'll strike back if they have to. Listen, the last big exploit that was out there was when guys were signing for 10, 15-year contracts to cut the cap hit down.
Yeah, right.
They ended that loophole right away and punished. I mean, it's probably wrongly punishing teams that had those players. I mean, maybe not in some cases. Like, some of them, you need to have that threat of, like, if they retire, you're getting take it on the chin. Yeah. But as far as like coming over the league coming over the top to put an end to something, yeah, they'll do it. And honestly, like, the PA can be mad about it, but this is something where it's just kind of like, listen, this is they can call it for like for competitive reasons, and that teams are if you're using this in a way to elude the cap. I mean, that's punishment that's stuff where you do get punished anyways. If you're trying to design things to get around it, doing it in the middle of the season is the big difference here. Like, if you sign a guy and you're trying to elude the cap in illegal ways, then you get punished. And then, the contract doesn't happen then, but doing it during the season and being like, yeah, Kucherov's definitely hurt. He's definitely still hurt. He'll be ready sometime right around the start of the playoffs.
April 25th, and the playoffs start on April 25th. Yeah.
Right. So, things like that, even, Vegas, Mark Stone, I mean, I know he was hurt, but is he hurt that long? Like, if Vegas gets into the playoffs, is he going to be there game 1? Probably. Yeah. Probably. I mean, that's the thing. Like, but like, they put these loopholes exist for reasons. People think that this stuff just, slips by when they're creating the CBA. It's like, how many good lawyers are on the NHL side of things and on the NHLPA side of things. You think they wouldn't think of stuff like this to be like, well, maybe some team could do this and figure it out. All it takes is one GM to be like, oh yeah, we can do that. That's fine. And everybody goes, oh, right. Yeah, we can do that.
honestly, Joe, I think that behind closed doors, Donald Fear goes, "Oh yeah, we'll talk about that with the owners, and after they're done talking, we'll summarily dismiss it. So don't worry about it, guys."
Right. Basically, the player, from what I heard from Elliot Friedman, it's like, okay, you're wanting to change the CBA. What benefit is it to us, and what are you going to give us to change this? And as soon as they say that, it's over with, because they're not, the owners aren't going to give them anything. So, I just think it's hilarious that they're doing this. There's a couple teams were pissed off that people were manipulating the salary cap in that way, but that's a product of the flat cap. And there's, I don't think anybody foresaw that, and people are having to do things like, we know in the summer what we're going to see. We're going to see Shea Weber's contract traded. We're going to see, other injured players that have term. Their contracts going to be traded. Like, we know, it's probably Shea Weber is going to Minnesota so they can counterbalance the dead money on Parise and Suter's contract. It's a way of, this is the stuff that happens in the NBA. I don't see why, stuff like this doesn't happen in the NHL. I don't see a problem with it. I think it actually makes
the NHL sort of acts like, well, this doesn't happen in our league, and the NBA is just like, yeah, we don't care.
Yeah.
The only thing they all care about is tampering. Like, that's the only thing they really get up in arms about, is like, no, don't do that. So,
and Russ, everything is good between Kyle Davidson and Kyle Dubas. They sang Kumbaya at the GM's meetings, and
barn fight.
That's nice. I knew they would.
Kind of a barn fight.
Damn it! Where's Brian Burke when you need him? Okay, Joe, I wanted to talk about the Sabres because they're red hot right now, and
wild.
Yeah, things. Okay, I give them a lot of.
Who's in net? Oh, never mind. I don't want to start that.
I give them a lot of credit. Things have coalesced. I think Don Granato has done a really good job. A lot of the young players are playing well. Something that I didn't think was a great experiment has turned out to be fantastic, which is Tage Thompson moving to the middle. He's now got 28 goals.
Yeah.
And this is without Jack Quinn and without Owen Power and without the goaltender of the future, which, thankfully they're playing him in Rochester. Things have turned out a lot better than anybody could have assumed with the Sabres this year.
Yeah, I think this is a case where they've found, and this is trite as anything, they found their Ted Lasso and Don Granato. Mm-hmm. I think they found a guy who knows how to identify as well as he can with younger players, and even, the old guys on the Sabres aren't really old guys. You got to tell me Kyle Opozo's old? No, get out of my face with that, please.
31 or 32 years old.
Well, they have an old goalie, Joe. They have an old goalie.
Well, listen, he's essentially like an assistant coach on the ice at this point, which, that helps. And anybody who knows Craig Anderson knows he's as cool as a cucumber. Like, and he's an intense competitor, but he's cool, man. Like, you can't rattle him. So, they bust his chops. They call him the old guy. Like, he loves it. Like, how do you not love it? Like, the team plays well enough in front of him. They're able to kind of help him out on occasion. So, man, it works for him. But I really think this is Granato being such a positive coach, where he's a hands-on guy. He's a coach who likes to coach. He likes to instruct. Right. He's always been that style. This is his first head job of the NHL anyways. So, he's using a lot of that stuff that he had in the US, the USA Hockey days and whatnot to kind of put that forth. And you know what? It works with these guys.
How many years can you sign him for, though, Joe, knowing that his health wasn't great and those kinds of things?
I don't know. I don't know. It's to me, that's that you cross that bridge when you come to it. They've got him signed for. I think they signed him for 2 years.
2 years. Okay.
I think it was 2 years they signed him for as coach. So you worry about that next year, but
okay.
As far as I look at it, I think it was 2 or 3 years. Either way,
it was 2. I think you're right.
Either way, when he gets to the end of it, listen, coaches last 2 years here, period. The last 10 years, they've lasted 2 years, if that. So, the fact that we're already thinking like, what's his extension going to be is pretty wild unto itself. It was 3. Okay. So either way, it's far down the road, but This is obviously trending in a very good direction with the way the guys are playing now. The key now is that you have to get that to carry over to next season, which, you're going to add Quinn to the lineup you're gonna probably get Peterka at some point during the season, because I mean he's scoring at the same kind of, well, not the same kind of rate as Quinn, but it's a crazy rate for somebody who's playing his first year in North America in a tough league. Like he's scoring at a ridiculous rate, and
I still would tell fans to temper that. Like, I don't think he's a 40-goal scorer in the NHL. So
no, but like, hey, the other thing is Olofsson's woken up here like the last few weeks. So, that was, he went from a guy where you're just like, man, this stinks. His shots isn't there, his goals aren't coming, and I don't know. A couple of those shots last night certainly look like Victor of old. So,
and Skinner's gone from a $9 million albatross to somebody who's actually being productive, and you can put him with players. And I mean, that just shows that was all Ralph Kruger's.
Again, use your guys in the right way. Like that's the other part of it. And this was something that after a while with Ralph, it was just like, what are you doing? Why is Skinner playing on the third line with Vlad Sobotka? Like, why? How is that happening? Why is
Kruger doesn't need to answer to you, Joe Jordan?
Oh no.
Let's
he's got to answer to the city of Buffalo.
Let's sign Taylor Hall, who's at the same position, and let's put him with Jack Eichel.
That's different.
I know
the motivation on that's a different one. That's let's make Jack happy. Let's see if we can bring him back into the fold. And that couldn't have gone any worse than it did. So
and the only thing, Russ, I just looked up his stats. Luukkonen now with Rochester, 25 games, he's under 500. His goals against is 3.46. His save percentage is 895. That's a concern. I mean, Rochester's not a bad team.
His save percentage is up a lot from the beginning of the year. His first month was pretty rough.
Okay. No, look, I'm not worried about him. I just didn't like the talk like he should just stay up in the NHL this year, because I feel like he needed to get these reps in the AHL, get some playoff reps, get all of that before he's ready to embark on his NHL career. And that's all I was looking at. I'm not worried about the guy.
Amerks might not make the playoffs at this rate.
Okay,
their defense is porous. It's a very porous defense, and Luukkonen's getting the kind of work he had in Sudbury, where it was just he was under attack the entire, every game, all game long. He was just, shots everywhere. Which, I mean, hey, he thrived under it in Sudbury, but the quality of competition in the AHL is a little bit higher.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things we wanted to touch on, because we've seen like over the last couple of days, a lot of these players who are NCAA products signing with teams. I know that Noah Cates with the Flyers, Nick Aberzies with the Leafs. It looked like he was going to possibly start his first NHL game tonight, but I guess they want to give him a couple days of like practicing with the team before. But Joe, I mean, I always find this part of the year after the deadline, when all these college players are coming in, extremely intriguing, because we really don't know what they are, but we'll find out pretty quickly. And a guy like Aberzies could be somebody mixes in on the third or fourth line with the Leafs. So, like, what names out there that have signed or are going to sign intrigue you?
Well, the thing about Aberzies I just learned was that his dad is Dave Aberzies, the former drummer of Pearl Jam. I did not know that.
What?
So
I did not know that either.
Holy moly.
Saw that pop up on Twitter yesterday. Now I probably should verify it before doing any of that.
I would have certainly asked him about it when I interviewed him a couple of years ago. That's interesting.
Yeah. Mike's gonna look it up right now.
Yes.
But somebody said that, and I was like, that can't be the case. But that's a whole different kind of interesting, I suppose. But
if that is the truth, I hold elite prospects responsible for not putting that in there, and I work for them. So,
but yeah, I think with the college free agent class this year, it's not very exciting. There's not a lot of names that have jumped out, or guys that jumped out either in the tournament or at the end of the season, where you're like, all right, like these guys are going to sign someplace. I think of some of the years in the past where, because I'm such a Buffalo head, when Casey Nelson came out.
Right.
Like that was, he was one of the big free agents to come out that year, because he scored a bunch. He played on a really good team at Minnesota State. There isn't like a guy where you're just like, wow, that, you got to get that guy. Teams have scouted college so well now that the guys that do have great seasons, they're already spoken for, whether they've been allowed to stay in college that long or they're brand new. No, not always, but
I'll tell you a story about Abersees. I have a long list of guys. That's why I let you guys talk about your guys first.
He's not related to the drummer from Pearl.
Okay, Twitter's a liar.
One extra B in Dave Abersees' name, so it was a good.
I'll tell you this about him. When I was writing for McKean's, and I really liked the guys at McKean's, I did get into quite a debate with somebody about him, and I was told that he will not play in the NHL. He's not as good as you're saying he is, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, I like this guy. I stand behind it. The next year, he was ECAC Player of the Year. Now he's on a really good arc. I think he can play in the NHL. I don't know if he's a full-time NHLer for the rest of his career. That will remain to be seen, but he's got great speed, really good puck handling. I think there's times in the game where he has good impact, and then there's other times in the game where, he doesn't disappear, but maybe isn't as impactful. So if that can change a little bit as he starts getting into the pros, then that might be a big thing. But he was certainly a big player on his team. So
yeah, and the thing that again that I find most curious about players coming out now is whether it's a good decision. I mean, okay, Owen Power was the first pick in the draft. He's more. It sounds like it's like 95-5, Joe, that he's going to sign after Michigan wins or gets eliminated, and will burn the first year of his ELC with the Sabres. Yeah. Beniers, Johnson, maybe Portillo, maybe Brisson. I mean, that Michigan team is probably going to lose.
Yeah, Brisson's coming out. I will tell you this, Joe, because you didn't know the other day, but just so you know, and other people who know you maybe are tuning in for this, after seeing Power again just last weekend and really seeing him for the last couple of years, I think he'll be better than Aaron Ekblad because he's actually a better skater than Aaron Ekblad. Like,
interesting.
It's unbelievable how good his skating is now.
Yeah, Power. Listen, Power's he's been waiting on this. Like, the Sabres have really actually been patient that they didn't sign him as soon as they drafted him. I mean, he wanted to go to. I mean, completely understand why he wanted to play at Michigan for another year there, because look at the roster.
Right.
With him, I'm very eager to see him play with this Sabres group. Him coming in, creates another question for Buffalo as to who are you going to get to play next to him.
Right.
Never mind this season, because this season, this season's done, whatever, get him his games. Right. That's fine. But that's a big task for them in the offseason, is to find a right-hand defenseman that can hang with him.
And the suggestion I had on that, Joe, and maybe, he's a little long in the tooth, so maybe he wouldn't play out the remaining 3 years of his contract, was Jeff Petrie, because I think Jeff Petrie, Montreal's looking to move him. Mm-hmm. The Sabres have tons of cap space. At least right now they do. And, he's a solid veteran. And I think putting him against, he could be the guy that sort of stays back and lets Power carry the ball. I mean, I think that would probably be a good fit. But I don't know if Montreal's just looking to trade him for nothing, or whether they'll expect to get something back for him.
Mike, remind me, I have big Leaf news at the end of the show. I just got an email on something. So
okay.
I was going to say, Petrie. I've liked Petrie since he played at Michigan State. He was a guy who impressed me so much when he was playing in college. I mean, he was. There was a game I saw him play in the GLI where he was hands down the best player on the ice. Like, there was nobody that could hang with him. And he's playing defense, which when he was scoring goals and collecting points, he was so impressive. That's an intriguing option. I do wonder if that the age is a factor.
Yes.
I think it has to be a factor with the Sabres.
I think it's more a factor than the salary is.
Yeah, the salary I think is whatever. Like, they don't have cap worries. They have the bigger worry for them is whether Terry wants to spend the money. That's really where that's at. But Petrie's an interesting one. I like I said, I love his game. I don't know if he's the right guy though. Like, that's.
You think more of a stay-at-home guy, because he's more of an offensive guy.
I think the idea is to find somebody that can run with him for a few years.
Okay.
Yoki Haryu's been good with Dahlin. I don't think he's good for Dahlin. I take that. I switch that. He's good for Dahlin. I don't think he's good with him. I think Yoki Haryu he can't be playing more than 20 minutes a game.
Yeah, he's a second pairing defenseman, I think.
Yeah, I think at best, yeah, he's a second pairing guy at best. Which but listen, if it makes Dahlin play the way he's playing now, fine. whatever, you can live with it. Because if you're getting what Darlene's doing now, because the Yoki Hart you're playing next to him, he can stay, give him a lifetime contract for as long as Darlene's here for. That's where that begins and ends. But Petrie's interesting. I just wonder if there's a bigger deal to be had for somebody who's a little bit higher in quality.
But the guys that interest me right now are the ones who maybe are having to make a decision on whether they're going to sign right now. I mean, with the Sabres, I know that they were in on Devin Levi after having a really good year at Northeastern, and they haven't signed him yet. So that would indicate to me that maybe he wants to stay in another year. With the Leafs, Matthew Nyes has been unbelievable and looks like a bull in a china shop, but he's only 19, Joe. And the thing is, I mean, I know Leaf fans are like, oh my God, this is the next Tom Wilson. Let's sign him now. Let's bring him in. Let's put him on the left wing with Tavares and Nylander. This is a way you ruin somebody if you bring him in too quickly. So on those situations, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's different for Nyes because Minnesota, if you get guys that are playing at Minnesota or Michigan or any of the, the blue blood, elite hockey schools where they crank out NHL guys constantly, it's a different discussion. I think with Nyes, he's, he played so well for Minnesota this year and he looks dynamite in the tournament. It's easy to get excited about a guy like that. At 19, again, the adjustment between college and the AHL is a pretty big one. And, never mind the NHL. Like that's a big change. We're not talking about a guy who's, who's getting done as a senior and he's 22 or 23,
right?
And coming out of college. This is 19's a little bit of a different beast. So it's not to say I'm hesitant on it, but you do worry a little bit about the development. When Buffalo had Casey Middlestat sign after he did, probably wasn't the right time. He probably needed another year.
No, we know now it definitely wasn't.
Oh,
but they got fooled by that 10-game window at the end of the year.
Yes,
yeah. And then they ended up trading Ryan O'Reilly and saying, okay, we got Casey Middlestat as our number 2 center, and that was a disaster.
That's not why they traded O'Reilly.
Oh, I know. That's not the reason. But they thought that they had a replacement for O'Reilly with Middlestat, and he wasn't ready for.
Here's what I'll say about Nyes, because I got to see him in season, first in the USHL, and then in season, then in World Junior Camp. World Junior Camp initially was a battle for him. He did not, and that wasn't like he walked in and took over the camp. Like, Beniers walked in, he took over the camp, right? Like that was just, Nyes did not do that. And so I am a little worried that it could be a little fast. I know the Leafs are going to sign him because I spoke to somebody that basically said they had guys in the city ready to sign him if they lost last game. So they're going to sign him.
But now it's going to have to wait until April the 7th or April the 9th because that's the,
Right. But I would not put him in the NHL. This is not Chris Kreider. He's 2 years younger. I would not do it.
And Russ, what they might do based on, they might put him with the Marlies and call up Nick Robertson, who's
right. And I think that's a better course of action. But I know the hype is going to be, look, he's a big guy. Look, he could score around the net. And Joe knows it already. Joe knows the talking points. But I would
pipe train.
I would stay away from that. Abersees is an older kid. Right. So if you want to bring him up and try it because of his elite speed, try it. That's fine. But I think this is different with Nyes. A couple other guys I'll bring up, like Jordan Harris for Montreal is massive. Like I really was worried a couple of years ago whether he was going to he was going to sign with Montreal until the Kent Hughes thing. I kind of wondered about that. He's a really good offensive defenseman. I don't think he's a first power play guy, but he could be a second power play guy. And he's a really good skater, and he's got a great hockey IQ. And so he's on like the high end. He's not the high end like Jake Sanderson, but he's on the high end of college defensemen that come out. Jake Sanderson's on his own island. Like very few college players come out like Jake Sanderson. He is a true top pairing defenseman. He will be better than Shabbat all around, but he will not probably have the super high end offensive ability of Shabbat, but will still get his points because he's still really smart and gets them on the power play too. But I think you still want to use Shabbat as your number 1 power play guy and probably use Sanderson on your number 2. And I think that's the way I would roll with it. But in game, Sanderson's unbelievable. And he really, he's ready. I got to see him up close at camp. I just super impressed with everything he does, all around game, the speed, all of it. So, Brink will be up with the Flyers. I don't think he should stay with the Flyers because he's had a propensity of getting hurt. This is like one of the years he hasn't gotten hurt. I think he still needs to get physically stronger because sometimes he's a gutsy kid and puts himself in bad spots to get points. And I think, hey, that's what you want. But I think you got to be really fully ready for that at the NHL level. And I think even though he's like the nation in scoring, I think, there's more to do there to kind of get physically ready for him. Ronnie Attard's a big, strong kid, but he's not ready for the pace of the NHL. He needs 1 or 2 years in the AHL before he comes up. But again, the talk in Philly is, well, we're looking for big and tough. And yes, he can play the big and tough part. But again, he's got a great shot. It's not like Sam Morin, when they used to be like, oh, Sam Morin's got a good shot. Yeah, he used to have to wind up and be completely open to have a good shot. Ronnie Attard could run a power play and have a good shot. But the problem is Ronnie Attard to play at the NHL pace is going to need some time. So I don't want him to get more than 1 or 2 games with Philly. And I'm going to bring up Ethan DeYoung with Quinnipiac. He was the best defensive forward in the ECAC this year. He was like 32 points in 41 games, something like that. He's been a top liner for years now with Quinnipiac. He's part of their 100-point club. He actually got 100 points in his career there. This kid can play, and he had 1 assist in the first game, and I think 1 or 2 in the second game before they got eliminated, in a much closer game against Michigan than I think Michigan wanted. He can skate. He has a good hockey IQ. He is a free agent. I would definitely sign him because, again, there's a lot of players. There's Blankenberg in Michigan. He's going to get signed. Even if he only turns into an AHLer, there are teams that need that need AHL depth, that maybe a guy you can call up occasionally to the NHL can play a little bit. So there's a lot of these guys, but DeYoung may have a chance to play in the NHL regularly.
And Joe, I know that they were making a big deal when I was watching the one of the Minnesota games about Ben Meyer, who made the U.S. Olympic team, and he's an undrafted free agent. So, I'm sure his representatives are holding court. And once Minnesota gets eliminated or wins, then, he's going to go somewhere. I mean, I don't know. I don't know where he slots in. Maybe he's an NHLer. Maybe he's borderline, but he did look impressive. And that's the thing. You see them in the college game. You see them sort of dominating at that level. You got to remember that level is not the NHL. So it's a question of where he's going to slot in.
Yeah, Meyer's interesting. I think he's a guy that, I don't know how eager, again, putting it in the frame of Buffalo, I don't know how eager they would be for getting in, more college free agents. But listen, they need help in Rochester. So I mean, they need more depth there. They've been playing a lot of ECHL level type guys down there. So that's certainly a guy I would look into. I mean, Sabres have to be very familiar with him. They've been watching Ryan Johnson for a couple of years now, so they got to know what Ben Meyer's about. But I want to believe that would be a guy that would be of interest for them. But again, I think Buffalo, they've got to get their own college guys figured out, like what their timelines and their schedules are. I think Levi, I was pretty confident he was going to sign the second Northeastern was out. I don't feel confident about that now.
I don't either.
His backup went into the transfer portal. So,
okay.
So like that doesn't sound like a situation where Devin Levi was going to leave, because I mean, if he was going to sign, then I would imagine the backup would have been like, okay, it's my job.
Joe, the transfer portal to me now is when you get beamed up on Star Trek. It's like that. You get beamed to another team. The transfer portal has become like a fascinating thing. The coach from AIC was talking about that post game when they got eliminated from Michigan, because he's got players that came to him via the transfer portal, and he said the way it's going to be now is he won't be able to get the kinds of players that he was getting before. And yeah, it's an interesting little thing there in that sport.
It's a new wrinkle, and I think it's one that's honestly overdue. The old rules of basically telling college guys, like, you either stay at college or you're going to burn years waiting to play. Like, that was ridiculous. They make if a guy transferred, he had to wait a year to play. Like, get out of here. Like, that was stupid. But this is a different. It's a different thing, but it's one that they should have expected was going to come at some point.
Here's what I'll tell you about Myers, Mike, because I did see him in camp too, and I did sit next to somebody that watches him a lot.
Right.
Not so sure he's an NHL talent. Definitely an AHL talent. He could be one of those guys that is sort of like a tweener, and maybe he comes up and he could play, occasionally in the NHL, but he's still going to get signed because of the crazy year he's had, and he's scoring in the playoffs. He's going to get signed.
And just like you were saying, the Sabres would know about him because of Johnson, and the Leafs probably would know about him because of Nyes watching him. And they have a history of signing undrafted college free agents. Alex Steves out of Notre Dame is having a really good year in the AHL and got a look with the Leafs. I think he could be a fourth liner in a year or two.
The difference with Steves and Myers is I think Steves does more things and is not relying on his offense as his calling card. A lot of times, and I think Joe could speak to this too, it's rare when a college hockey player has offense as the best part of his game and it all translates to the NHL. That's a hard translate. Mm-hmm. That's why so many defensemen translate from college hockey to the NHL, because a lot of them are not super offensive defensemen.
Yeah. With forwards, it's a different beast, because some guys, they could score at great rates in college.
Right.
But it usually either meant that they, their peak level was the AHL, or that their whole rounded game didn't have enough to stay in the NHL. Like, I think of a Brandon Peary. Peary scored, he's a 20 goal guy in the NHL.
Cy Young winner.
20 goals, 2 assists. But like, why does, how does a guy like that not stick in the NHL? It's like, well, look at the other side of the puck. Like that's the issue with some of those guys. I think of, again, RPI centric here. Ryan Haggerty was a 30 goal guy at RPI. Been a great AHL player, but he's yet to even appear in the NHL.
The Rangers pumped him up. Don't worry. They pumped him up to a degree that he was never going to be able to reach. Yeah.
So I mean, there's guys like that, but defensemen, colleges very rarely have systems where they're, defensemen are asked to carry the offense, to push things. I think in Michigan and Minnesota's case, it's different because they have the talent.
Right.
Like that's what makes them
better. You got Brock Faber. You're not going to put shackles on them.
No. Like, you've got guys like that. You let them run. But for other teams, like, there are hidden guys around college hockey that they play on teams that aren't as good, and they don't have that kind of allowance for their guys to run because they just simply don't have the players to do it.
Now, we got about 10 minutes left in the show, and I want to touch on the playoff races from last night. The Oilers beat the team that supposedly is an NHL team, the Arizona Coyotes. The Blues beat the Canucks, and the Kraken beat the Kings. The Kings are struggling with injuries now.
They're really gonna have a hard time making it, Mike.
In the West right now, I think that it's a battle for third place in the Central, probably second and third in the Pacific, and the 2 wild card spots. And right now it's 81 for St. Louis, 81 for the Kings. Edmonton at 79, Nashville at 80, then Vegas at 76, and Dallas at 75. But they have like 3 games in hand on almost everybody. So Joe, in that mix there, I mean, who do you think is when the music stops, who's going to be left standing?
The West has been such a weird thing all year, especially the Pacific Division. I mean, the first 2-3 months of the year, it looked like Anaheim and Calgary were going to be duking it out to go, to take it on. But, Ducks got caught up too, and they've come apart. And, Vancouver's taken off since Boudreau's come in. But like, you see the issues that Vegas has had. I mean, people in Buffalo are having a great laugh at what's going on with Vegas because of Jack, but they have
but he's still playing.
Right. But there's so many injuries on that team. I mean, you look at the nightly, line drop of what they're playing with, and that's an AHL team with a couple of NHL guys on the roster. Like that's really tough. And if they, listen, if Vegas comes through it and they come out on the other side of the playoffs,
then they'll be okay.
They'll be a little bit better off, obviously, but that's asking a lot and that's putting a lot on Eichel's shoulders, honestly, to try to carry
that. Again, we kind of knew that they were kind of setting him up for that. So
I don't know,
better than we thought he would, but I don't want to spend too much time on Eichel. But he's doing okay.
He's doing fine. But Edmonton, Edmonton's the same problems all the time. Is the goaltending going to hold up? Can McDavid and Draisaitl carry everybody? That's the question on them.
Although becoming a factor now for him, which I'm happy about.
Yeah, he's been better, but consistency. That's the name of the game. And
their defense is average at best, and their goaltending is below average. And I said it for a fact at the beginning of the year that I thought Edmonton was going to miss the playoffs, but never thinking that they were going to get to this point. Now I think they're missing the playoffs. Now I think they don't have the goaltending, and I haven't looked at their schedule, but I'm telling you right now, if they're playing Calgary a couple times and they're playing some of the teams head to head, I have no confidence in they can outscore these teams. But as we get closer to the end of the year, Joe, it's going to start being playoff hockey, and they can't win that playing that way.
Yeah, and they got their teeth kicked in by Calgary, just a few days ago, and like that should be a wake up call for a team like that. Not that the Oilers ever need a wake up call. I mean, they're getting assailed with questions about about this stuff all the time. But when it's your rival and they beat you down like that, that's a different sort of thing. So if that doesn't snap them out of it and get them going, like that becomes a really tough situation. I'm looking ahead at their schedule. Let's see. Well, they got the Kings, Blues, Ducks, Sharks, Kings, Avs, Wild, Preds, Knights, Stars, Avs, Blue Jackets, Pens, Sharks, Canucks. It's a lot of teams that are going to be duking it out with them for spots in the Pacific. So they're going to get tested. And they've got to show through. I mean, you got a couple of games with the Kings alone. I think it was, two different ones with the Kings. That's tough. And ending the season with Vancouver. Imagine if it comes down to the playoff spot for that one. Holy cow!
I do want to mention the Blues because two interesting things. Again, I hated the Sammy Blais for Buchnevich trade. Mm-hmm. That trade may actually get the Blues to the Western Conference Finals because Tarasenko wanted to leave. He was unhappy. They get Buchnevich for a song, and I think Sammy Blais is okay, but he's not going to ever be a 55-point guy or more. And Buchnevich is going to be more than that. And Buchnevich has really gotten along great with Tarasenko. He's revived everything there. Tarasenko is not even talking about leaving. And now, for whatever reason, the hiccups when they hit Binnington, Ville Husso is the guy, and I'm convinced now that he will be the guy they run with to the Cup. And I think it's the difference of like Binnington has to be really pissed off to sort of be in the zone, and he hasn't really gotten to that point this year. And Husso is the opposite of him. He is that guy that sort of plays the system well, can make the second save when he has to, but he doesn't wander too far. He doesn't overextend himself too much. He just kind of plays that smart, safe goalie game and kind of leaves it up to his team. And I think the team is just responding better to him. And Berube is very aware of two goalies when he has two. He had Steve Mason and Ray Emery, and that was a whole song and dance for like an entire season. But I think he's at this point yesterday, Husso made enough big saves and Binnington has blown enough opportunities that I think it has shifted there, and that's going to help them, I think.
Joe,
and Husso, it's a contract year for him too.
Yeah,
let's not forget that he might be playing himself into a pretty juicy deal.
Doug Armstrong's in an awkward position here because he gave Binnington that long-term contract. He's making $6 million. Husso has been the better of the two goaltenders. He can walk for nothing. If they sign Husso, then they're probably trading Binnington, and there will be a market out there if they decide to do that, but. I mean, that's a difficult decision. I think, if Husso stands on his head in the playoffs, then that's probably what they're going to do.
All right. Mike, do you want your breaking Leafs news?
Just one. Let's just touch on the East first. We know what the 8 teams are in the playoffs, but you've got a race in the Atlantic right now, Joe, where, Tampa, Toronto, Boston are separated by a point. It's a question of who finishes in the wild card and who finishes. I mean, some people were saying Toronto or Boston would be better off finishing in the wild card instead and not playing Tampa and playing Florida instead. I don't think it's a winning proposition to play either one of those teams. But what are your thoughts on the East?
No, the Atlantic is an unenviable position because if you finish second or third, you're playing somebody else that's very capable of beating you in the first round, no matter what. If you finish fourth and you're in the wild, you've got the wild card spot. Well, you're getting Carolina or Florida. Congrats! Like that's, it's at least at this case, you don't have the playoff. Whether you're making it or not, worry going into the season. You have to treat the rest of the season as a you got to keep everybody healthy, but you got to get in the playoff mindset right away, because you're going to have such hard games the instant the playoff starts that if you're not ready and you're not prepared, you're in big trouble. Like you're going to be in big trouble really fast. And I saw the way Washington was playing a little bit last night. That looks like a team that, like, they should probably rest up a few guys, get them back in a couple weeks before the end of the season, and then say, like, all right, let's get it going here. Let's try to do something. But
Ovechkin's not going to sit down because he wants to.
No. Oh, no. You never sit Ovi. He's the guy. You don't have to worry about Ovi. Like Ovi's focused. He's a ridiculous person. He's just the machine. Russian machine never breaks. Russian machine never stops. Honestly, for him. So I don't sweat that. But if they want to get into a spot where they can avoid Carolina or Florida, I mean, I think that would certainly help them out a lot. But then you're either playing the Rangers or Pittsburgh. That's not great. Like that's not a great battle either. And honestly, they're probably not going to catch either of them. So unless the Rangers of Pittsburgh start getting really cold now, but I just don't see that working. But man, oh man, not to make it all Leafs, but like, do you really want to play Tampa or Boston in the first round? No, none of those choices are good.
It's death by firing squad or death by strangulation. No, or death by hanging. No, if I'm the Leafs, and I know this is the mindset of their fan base, they don't want to play Tampa for obvious reasons.
Right.
And there is a mental block when it comes to they will lose their minds if they play Boston and lose again. But I think the team that they want to play is Carolina. But the funny thing is that they want to play Carolina because Freddie Anderson, they think, is going to choke.
Right, because what he isn't in the playoffs. That's who I would want to play.
And knowing that the Leafs' penchant for things go completely wrong, he'll probably play like Terry Sawchuk.
Well, but if it's Mrazek against Anderson, then I'm worried.
It'll be Campbell.
It has to be Campbell. Like Mrazek, if he's in there, they're not winning.
Yeah, Mrazek's starting tonight against Boston, but Campbell's almost ready to come back. So,
well, I mean, here's the thing though. Like Freddie's not going to play 60 games this year. Like that's
maybe that'll be the difference.
And that's he played 66 games 2 years in a row when they played Boston.
Can't imagine why he burned out in the playoffs. No idea.
No,
and they have a sports science department, so there's no excuse for the Leafs there.
Yeah.
They do.
All right, Russ,
breaking news.
Give us the breaking Leafs news. If it's not the signing of Marshall Refi.
It's not. Marshall Refi is not a bad player, though. I actually like Marshall Refi.
Marley signed you Marshall Refi. Yeah.
Okay, no. I mean, Marshall Refi, 3-4 years ago, there was a high ceiling for him.
They love their Harvard guys. They got
he's a pretty good puck mover, and he's got a shot. I think he could play a little bit. I don't know if he'll be an NHLer, but here's the breaking news.
Okay.
From the makers of Flutie Flakes, John Tavares has Recipe 91. It is a cereal made of dark chocolate, dried blueberries, and coconut. It'll be sold at Sobeys and Recipe91.com. I implore all Islander fans to go and buy a box because it goes to the John Tavares Foundation. Show that you're the bigger people here. And
that's a good cause. That's a good cause. And coconut, because that's what hit the ice when Corey Perry slammed them in game 1 last year.
But it's a granola-based cereal. Those are the other mixers in it. I read over the granola-based. I like everything but the blueberries. I might pick out the blueberries. That's the only thing. But I like everything else in there.
That sounds really appealing to me. Dark chocolate, coconut, and blueberry. Sign me up, man. I might run across the border and get a box now.
You can go to recipe91.com and not go anywhere. Just get it.
April 1st, Joe. You can do it on. You can just hit the Arrive Can app and hop over the border. That's all you'll need.
Oh man, well, April 1st.
Friday.
I don't know if I can. April 1st though. April 1st. Can you trust that? I don't know.
They don't have a sense of humor.
They might spray seltzer in your face when you hit the border.
I have to trust that it's my birthday. But anyway, okay.
That's a great day for your birthday.
Yeah, of course. It's exactly. It fits me to a T. Okay. Great show, guys. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Joe Yerdon, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.